Well, hello everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar From Volume to Velocity, Solving the Hiring Match Problem with AI. My name is David Forey. I'm a Senior Vice President here at Brandon Hall Group, and we look forward to having this conversation. And we hope that you will also join us in the chat as well as asking a lot of questions. But Amy, why don't you kick things off for us and start with a round of introductions?
Yeah, absolutely. So, hi, everybody. My name is Amy Miller. I am with iSolve. I am iSolve's product evangelist, and I am lucky enough that I get the opportunity to spend time with all of these amazing talent experts with us today, who we're going to be talking again, as David mentioned, a little bit about what's happening in the industry right now with hiring and give you some insights on what each of these experts have today. But what we're going to do is I'm going to first get out of the way just a couple items, and then we'll get to our introductions. The first item that I did want to let you all know is that this is a credit approved session. So the first question we usually get in here is, when do I get my credits, or how do I get my credits? So at the very end of this webinar, there is going to be an email that's sent to you, actually two emails, I believe. Forgive me if it's only one. But those two emails that I believe that are going to be sent, one is going to be an evaluation to let us know what you thought of today's session, because we would love your feedback, get your insight, so that we can learn from what we're doing. And if you found this something that's valuable to you, we obviously want to continue to do things like this. And then the second would be the credit information. So you will get an email sent to you to let you know what those credits are, or that code that you need to be able to submit that for your, whether it's your SHRM CP, your HRCI credits, whatever that you need that for. All right, so that's my quick just some housekeeping items. So what I'm going to do at this point in time is I am going to pass this over to Heidi. So Heidi, I'm going to let you go first and do your introduction, and then we'll go ahead and let you pick who you'd like to go next.
Awesome. Thank you, Amy. And thank you, Brandon Hall, for having us on. We're super excited to have this conversation today. And I think we've got some fun content to talk through. So very excited. My name is Heidi Barnett. I'm based here in Utah. Um, I'm a wife and a mom of four kids who are all going back to school tomorrow. So it's a good day. I feel like we survived summer and had a really good time. But professionally, I've been in the HR tech space for about 15 years. So I started at a little onboarding company, and then after that, quickly transitioned over and spent nearly 14 years building Applicant Pro, which is an applicant tracking system and a bunch of different things related to hiring. So I went from running marketing there to running the company. So my last role was CEO of Applicant Pro, and I was able to help transition the company over to an acquisition with isolved. So today, I serve as president of the talent acquisition products division at isolved, where we spend time building out a lot of the technology pieces that our companies use every single day. There's a thread through all of it. And really, I guess it comes down to I love building things, businesses and teams and people. And I think hiring is one of the most important things that a company can do. And I saw that from the tech space. I saw that from building marketing teams from the ground up, and also running it as a CEO. So it's interesting to be able to think about hiring in that way. So I care a ton about it, and I'm excited to share my perspective today with you. So I'm now going to pass my the intro mic over to Isela, my colleague here at iSolved, so you guys can get to know her a little bit better.
Thanks, Heidi. So my name's Isela Conley. Today, my role is VP of HR Operations at iSolved. That just happened about 4 months ago, where I was head of talent acquisition here at iSolved. For those that don't know iSolved, we are a 600 million private equity backed SaaS HCM company. So we build the software for HR teams that use it to hire, to pay, to develop, and retain people. We also have our own ATS, which is what Heidi and her team built. So I'm in a unique spot on this panel because I'm coming from the lens as a practitioner, but then also as somebody whose company builds the software that we also use internally. Today, I run or our team runs HR for about 3,000 employees on the same platform that our own clients use. So when something doesn't work, I find out immediately, not only for our clients, but also for us internally. And that's something I can't exactly blame the vendor because that's something on us. So we take high passion, integrity, pride into what we do. But my path here is a little bit unconventional. And I think that it's actually why I think about hiring and HR the way that I do. I've been with iSolved for 3 years now. Prior to that, I came from the HCM space. Early in my career, I started in accounting, not HR. And from accounting, that foundation never left me. I think math is math, numbers don't lie. So data actually tells you what is actually happening, not what you think is happening. And that analytical lens has helped shape my role ever since. So my experience includes over 15 years of experience, everything from staffing, contingent staffing, RPO, BPO, high volume hiring, or when you think about hiring from, I would say, hire to retire, everything from early careers all the way from executive hiring. So there's obviously in staffing, there's no hiding, building the relationships that you have had that you've created along the way. Fast forward to now, my role has evolved deliberately beyond talent acquisition because there's a lot of stuff that I kept running into, but I think in talent, companies, I would refer it to as we build this beautiful front door. We hire the best of the best talent. We have smart sourcing. We have great interviews. Then we have the hire walk in through the door. And then what? And then that's the biggest part is how are we retaining that talent? How is their onboarding? How career paths, our compensation benchmarking? Are they performing? Are they underperforming? And that's where my involvement came into, okay, well, we're hiring these great people, but what are we actually doing to retain the people? Everything from benefits, from HR, from total rewards to compensation. So that's kind of my role today. Again, obviously very passionate because it all comes from the very beginning is how are we staffing these amazing people? How are we getting them through our front door? So I'm very excited to talk about our matching velocity problem. It is a problem that exists. It's evolving. We have some cool tips, tricks, hacks that we've used internally at iSolved that I think will be super value to everybody that's attending today as well.
I love that internal lens that you're going to bring to the conversation. I know I already introduced myself as a senior vice president, principal analyst here at Brandon Hall Group. I've been with the company for about 10 years, in the HCM space for 15 with HR, learning, talent, workforce strategy. I spend most of my time working on the people data layer and looking at talent in broad strokes. So I love having the talent acquisition conversation. It's a great example of when all areas of HR come together. It's no longer just about filling roles. Oftentimes talent acquisition has felt like it's in a silo. But I think more and more every day, that has certainly broken down as far as we need to really understand what all areas of the company is doing, where that talent's coming from, how do we build, develop, and move talent around the workforce, and having a similar language that we can all speak and talk about really excites me. So similar to Heidi, I have 3 kids, and mine went back a week and a half ago. And I can tell you they've already gone from saying, I'm bored to this is boring. So didn't take long.
It happens so quickly, doesn't it?
Sure it does.
All right. Well, I want to thank all of you for joining us today, and certainly everybody out there listening as well. Please keep the comments coming in the chat as David mentioned earlier, we'd love to be able to answer questions and certainly respond to those. But I'm going to go ahead and kick this off because, as you know, the title of this presentation is called From Volume to Velocity, Solving the Hiring Match Problem. And so we know that it kind of frames we have some type of matching problem, right? Not just a labor shortage. So what does that mean in practical terms to you? And I'll just throw it out. David, do you want to kick us off here?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing we really have to acknowledge is that hiring feels very different right now. For a long time, the conversation was mostly framed around talent shortages. And of course, there are still roles and industries where that applies. But what we're seeing is many organizations do have applicants, they have activity, they have resumes coming in. They even have more candidate volume than they know what to do with. So the challenge is the volume. And that doesn't automatically translate into better matches. So when we talk about a matching problem, we're really talking about signal quality. Do we know what skills actually matter in the role? Are we elevating the skills consistently? Are we relying too heavily on resumes, titles, credentials, keywords? And are hiring managers actually aligned in what good looks like? I think that's kind of the conversation today that we're going to unpack. And I know that one of the stats that I put in the description here was 1 in 5 organizations say that they don't have a standardized screening process that they follow consistently. And to me, that's a big issue for the talent acquisition function. And then one other quick stat that we have is 57% of organizations cite alignment between talent acquisition and business objectives as their top priority. But that alignment cannot stay at the strategy level. It really has to show up in how roles are defined, how candidates are screened, and how interviews are structured.
Yeah, I want to piggyback a little bit on what David was talking about with volume, and you say it's interesting. I always say like it's pretty broken right now, right? There were cracks before, and then I think that the turn of AI and making it easier to apply, and we're having a whole bunch of interesting phenomena we'll talk about a little bit later happening. But I was talking to a tenured HR professional here in Utah, and she said that in 1 year they've seen a 300% increase in applicant flow. And she's just been, floored by that number. It just seems like it's such a huge jump. And so I think that we're spot on in Amy, you identifying that, it isn't necessarily a volume problem. We're getting the volume, but the challenge is in us really knowing what to do with them and matching them. And really like looking and deciding the screening process and reviewing the application and deciding who moves forward and then actually using the technology. I think that's the other piece, is that we have more technology than we've ever had before. And so what we're feeling is an influx of candidates, an overwhelming abundance of those, plus also an overabundance of technology that's here to help us, but isn't necessarily doing its job. And I think that's as from the technologist side of this equation, we really need to be better about that. I think that it's like you go to HR tech and it's like, hey, there's this and this and this. It's like all these shiny things, but is it actually helping our technology or our people who are in the seat making these hiring decisions? And I think that we're going to see some falling out or falling off and really some centralization around that, hopefully. So I love Isella's perspective here. I think that you have a unique perspective in how volume appears in your world.
It's true. The applicant to hire ratio is higher than it's ever been. So, David, to your point, Heidi, it is. We have a team internally of about 8 recruiters, and we have learned what titles drive more volume. So, fun fact for everybody on the call: anytime you use operations in any title, that title is so vague. It can mean so many things. In any industry, you're going to get inundated with the volume. So that's one of the things when we're looking at these titles, right? I wouldn't go for the generic title. But then I also saw this one title that said storyteller, evangelist. So let's not make up titles either, right, guys? So we want to speak to a real title that resonates, that I wouldn't say is necessarily the most popular one, but it's very true to what the position is. And that's something that has been helpful for us. And I know we'll go into more of these discussion questions there, but you're exactly right. And so how do we get through that? It's the good news is that yes, AI is here. We're leveraging it not only candidates but internally, and there are some tools and resources that will go on in this webinar to help, right, those of us, so you're not going through 200 resources or 200 applicants, or worse, you're just ghosting the rest of those applicants, because we want to talk about candidate experience, which is also coming up on our webinar today. But that, this problem does exist. It's here today. And that's kind of where we're going today, is like, okay, well, it's here. How do we overcome that? What is the best, efficient, smart way to do that quickly, leveraging AI?
Yeah, right. So I think all three of you, talked about the high applicant volume that everybody's seeing. But it's interesting that they're still struggling to identify who those right candidates are. So, what's the disconnect, right? So if I've got 300 plus or 300 times those applicants, you feel like, gosh, I can pick that right candidate out because I've got so many people to pick from. What's the disconnect, or what's the area that people need to pinpoint here?
Yeah, I can hop in on this one first. I think really what we're being asked for by a lot of professionals is help us prioritize, right?
Yeah.
Because there's no way we can go through a list of candidates. We want to know who we should look at first. And so and recently we've seen are they even a real person, right? And I think even, I mean, I don't know. A month ago, I would have never thought that was a question that we would have had to really sort through and sift through, but it's becoming more and more apparent. And also, did this person actually want to apply for this job, which is another scenario that I don't think we had thought about before, but Indeed came out with Apply For Me, where you opt in and say, go ahead and apply for jobs for me. And so on the backside, it's, are these people, do they know who we are? Are they even interested in coming to work for us? So, all of these things kind of bubble up in how are we going to identify and help you guys really find the right person. And so it's interesting, and I think a lot of it comes back to matching and good information on the front end. Estella talked a little bit about the job ad, and having that good information as a starting point makes a massive difference in connection of people to the job. And I think onboarding for me starts at the job ad, right? From the very beginning. Right. And their employee experience starts there. And so I think that's where a lot of this starts from and stems from. But then what comes after that? How are we using the technology to help surface those who are a good fit? And we've built some things into our systems to help with that, and are continuing to build, right, to help surface what those are. But I think that's really what it is how do you take the volume and apply systems to it that will then allow for us to be able to see those who are the best fit first.
Yeah. I don't want to give it. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Sam.
Oh, no, I was just going to say at iSolve, Heidi, this is one, again, our internal team, we see this play out in our own data across our own client base. And I'll be clear, the issue isn't candidate quality. It is definition quality, which goes back, Heidi, to your job ad, right? Most organizations cannot clearly articulate before the job is posted what the person in that role will be able to do in 30 days, 60 days, and 90 days. They can describe the role, but they cannot describe success in the role. And those are two completely different things. And then this is where it gets really interesting. When your definition of a good candidate is vague, every tool downstream amplifies that vagueness, right? Your ATS filters on keywords, but whose keywords? Your hiring managers is interviewing based on gut, but collaborated against what? Your AI screening tools ranks candidates, but against what success
Yeah.
criteria, right? So garbage in, garbage out. It doesn't matter how sophisticated the technology is if the underlying signal is weak. And that's the stat that I keep coming back to, right? Where organizations using structured skill-based screening consistently outperform those using resume first filtering on quality of hire and the 12-month retention. I would say probably about only 1 in 5 organizations, to David, your first point, right, applies a standardized screening process consistently. So that gap is the problem, not necessarily the volume of that.
Okay, so Acela, you just mentioned in regards to resume first filtering, finding that perfect candidate
Yeah.
and the inconsistent screening. So what are we getting wrong with that? Right? Let's get a little bit more specific with that. What are we getting wrong with looking at the resume first filtering?
Yeah, so I would say the job ad is one start. If it's a vague job ad, I can say we had a role at ISOL where we were filling repeatedly. It's an evergreen role. It's a term that we use in staffing, right? This is a role that we're always going to hire for. The high volume of applicants every cycle, we're used to it. We kept hiring people who looked right on paper, and we noticed that our 90-day retention on that role was 61%. So that's not a pipeline problem. That's a definition problem. We didn't actually know what we were hiring for until we sat down and asked the top performer in that role to describe in their own job in layman's terms, what are they going to be doing? And with that said, almost had no resemblance to the actual job description. So in that case, or to answer your question, right, this is one scenario where we took that role. We had assessment hiring. We took all of our top performers in that role that are killing it, crushing quota, whatever the role may be. And we used that assessment. We made our own interview assessment. So we put that as part of our interview process, not from the job description, but from what our own top performers are doing, and created benchmarks. So now we're running this assessment. And that was a good way when you get 300 applicants. Part of our interview process was an assessment, and there's a lot out there, right? So use the one that's best for your organization, and you don't want to overkill. Obviously, this too. So there is a strategy to this, but for us, we took that assessment, used the benchmarks of our top performers, which helped from the high volume perspective. So we rebuilt the process around what they told us. And then retention on that role moved to 84% in 2 cycles. Same labor market, same compensation, same recruiter, different definition of success. So the volume didn't change, but the clarity did in that specific scenario.
Oh, I love assessments. I could talk about that all day long. They're such a great predictor. I think the stats are about it's like 2 times more a better predictor than a resume if you include an assessment. Because what is a resume? It's a polished up marketing document, right? Where people are marketing themselves. And before AI, it was, how great of a resume writer are you? Or could you pay money to hire somebody to do that for you? And now what we have is everyone plugging it in and using the tools to help them create an incredible resume that's polished up, keyword matched. And then on the other side, we're using the technology to screen, right? So 71% of applicants are using AI to create their resume, and 82% of companies report that they're using AI in order to be able to screen. So we have the battle of the AIs and coming together. And so I think this is, to your point, Acela, like it's a piece of the puzzle, but it can't be the whole puzzle anymore. And we need to rely on other pieces that will help us to be able to understand that. Interviews are great, but with a standard, because if not, you're going off of your gut instinct, and it's hard to be able to say, this is what we're looking for. And did they hit those things, especially when you hire by committee or multiple interviews? And I think that becomes an even more important predictor of success with the assessment or other things. We apply a video interview a lot of times so that it helps us to be able to kind of wade through the bulk of it. So you can see somebody who's forward facing or public facing, you can start to see some of how they interact. So that's, coupling with the things that you said, Acela, it's a really interesting time, and we just can't rely on resume as much as we did anymore, or as we used to, which we probably shouldn't have it and either.
Yep.
Yeah, I do think resumes have become an overused and sometimes overtrusted signal. It
Mhm.
certainly tells you how someone describes their experience. It tells you where they've worked, titles, keywords, those types of things, but it doesn't always tell you how they think, how they solve
Yeah.
problems, how they learn, collaborate, or how they really would fit into the role. And especially as organizations, career paths, they're less and less linear. So, looking at something that happened in the past isn't a very good predictor of where they're going to be in the future at your organization. So, I think the perfect candidate mindset also creates a little bit of problems.
Mhm.
Yeah. Now, David, I'm going to ask you to weigh in on this one a little bit for me on hiring practice. So, moving away from the resume scanning versus skill-based hiring. So when we look at that practice beyond removing degree requirements or, again, people adding skill keywords that maybe get tied to the job descriptions, what does that look like?
Yeah, that's a big reason why I brought it up. I think for me, skills is really important. I've done a lot of research across all areas of HR, and skills-based talent acquisition is not just removing a degree requirement or things that are in the resume. It's not just adding a few skills to a job description, although often that's where we kind of start. Um, and it's not just about AI. That can scan for specific keywords in your skills. It's really redesigning the organization's the way they define, evaluate, and measure a person. And the first step is creating a better success profile. I think we talked about it a little earlier. Does the hiring team really know what they want? What does great actually look like? And what skills matter on day one? And then what skills can you learn in the future? So we're really trying to understand the behaviors and the capabilities to predict future performance. And then, of course, you have to connect that success profile to the rest of the hiring process. That means a clear screening criteria up front, more structured interviews along the way. That's better questions, more consistent evaluation across the candidates. But it also means using evidence. That could be work sample, scenario-based questions. We talked about those assessments, those structured assessments. That's going to help you understand what they've done in the past, but really helping to understand what they're going to do in the future is the most important thing.
Yeah. Now, I always love to get the insight from Isela. Obviously, you're living the role right now, and of course, Heidi, the development that you've done with iSolved and the talent acquisition. Isela, you've mentioned job descriptions a couple
Yeah.
times today. How are you writing your job descriptions? What are some recommendations that you're having that help build in that skills base versus resume to be able to screen better?
Right. So to, I would say I'm getting granular with the hiring manager in terms of what is this person going to be doing? Again, math is math. I look at percentages. Break it down for me from a percentage perspective. For example, there was one role where we were hiring for that had to be executive interfacing. Well, that to me can mean something totally different to Heidi. So what does that mean? And break that. And what percentage? Is it 20%? Is it 60%? Is this something that they need to have on day one? Is this something that can be coached on? Is this something that we can expect at the 90-day mark? Like, help me understand that specific piece. And I love this because this is where actual recruiters, not AI, not a robot, can vet this for you. So yes, we are a big proponent at iSolve. AI, we are creating AI agents. We release our new payroll guardian, and we're, all absorbing that. But there's some elements to every role, and I'm a firm believer in this. And one of them is people, that you need a human aspect to understand that. And so you can have, hey, ChatGPT or Claude, write me an intake, and it's very surface level. But this is where we need to be asking, what do they need to be able to do? Those are fundamentally different questions, and most hiring managers have never been asked that second one. I want to say we were hiring for an HR operations role on my team, and the original job description listed things like strong organizational skills, or attention to detail, or experience with HRIS systems. Very generic. Every candidate that we were seeing looks qualified. They do. They have it on their resume. You look on their LinkedIn, but nobody was actually being screened. So after that 20-minute conversation, which was me when I was talking to the recruiter, we identified three things that actually separated a top performer from average ones into that role. One was the ability to manage data discrepancies across multiple systems without freaking out, basically, without panicking. So when I'm talking, that this is where I was educating my recruiter in our intake, where I'm looking, hey, tell me scenarios where you've done this. Who was it impacted? How big was the organization? Is this a small mom and pop shop of 20 people, or is this a 3,000 org, right? I want to understand that piece. Number two, the ability to communicate a process change to people who don't actively want to change management. Like, how are we adopting that? How are we providing change management? And then three, knowing when to solve, this is a big one, knowing when to solve independently versus when to pull somebody in. We're really big on a solution oriented mindset. It's one thing to go to Heidi with all my problems. It's a different one to go to Heidi with all my problems. And then these are some solutions that I'm proposing. Those are the things that I wanted this candidate to articulate, and I want to hear based on their experience. I can't see that from a resume. So to answer your question, what we did is that we built a process around those three things. We wrote knockout questions that required a specific real answer, not a yes or no. And I'm not looking for something that you can copy and paste. We created a one structured interview question for each of those three criteria with a defined rubric, a scorecard. Again, math is math, numbers don't lie. And it was very clear. And so not, oh, I didn't like their answer, or it was vague, but this is getting real, again, factual, where does their answer demonstrate the specific behavior or not? And that result specifically is that we went from 140 applicants to 38 qualified candidates before a single human reviewed a resume. Now that is relatable for a recruiter, right? 140 applicants versus 38, where now they can start going through those just based on those knockout questions.
Oh, I love the work that you talked about doing in the beginning. You know, we talk about human in the loop with AI. This is a human starting the loop. And I think it makes a huge difference. And I think a lot of people are looking for tools. And of course, we love to provide those tools to you, but they're only as good as the work that you do. And so that is what has to happen. And a lot of it is sitting with the hiring manager, challenging them. There was a time I sat with a hiring manager because their criteria was crazy. And I was like, would you have qualified for this role? And they,
Yeah.
the answer came back, no. I had to challenge them and said, this was an entry level position. So let's take this back to entry level, but get really clear on the things that we want to have that will show that they'll be successful down the road in the future. And so I think that we downplay a lot of that work that we do on the front end. So I love that you brought that up.
Yeah, I would say skill-based hiring or skill-based talent acquisition requires HR to do something uncomfortable. You go back to the hiring managers and tell them, hey, your job description is not a screening tool. It's a marketing document, right? So that is the criteria that we've been using to evaluate candidates. It is a job posting. It's meant to get your target persona. It is meant to drive that traffic. But it's not, the title, or that is not necessarily the evidence of it. That is where we're getting really granular with those hiring managers. And then you can use tools, whether it's a knockout question, whether it's a rubric, whether it's a scorecard. That's what you can use AI for. When you have all those applications, use AI, right, to say, hey, these are all my scorecards. This is my rubric. Rank my top 10. That's where you can leverage AI to help you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'd like to pull in both Heidi and, of course, share, knowing the tool so well that you do, and developing it. I'm going to kind of break this up into two parts for y'all. So, where is AI genuinely helping talent acquisition teams? So let's start with that first part. So the positive, where
Yeah.
are we getting the biggest bang for your buck?
I think there's a couple things about AI that we've tried to focus on. One is repeatable tasks, right? Repeatable admin tasks. What can we eliminate in those areas to get our people back to helping people, right? Because that's why we're here. That's why HR, a lot of times, why are you in HR? Because I love people. Great, let's get you back to people. So that's the first thing, is it can we something repeatable or admin? The other thing, and Estella brought this up briefly, is the pattern recognition. Is there something that we can then look at a large swath of something and find patterns, find, something that is better or can help us to be able to identify? And so a couple of things that we've done, really early, we did job description writing. So we have a job ad writer pro that you can put the information in, and it actually matches to the algorithms of where the jobs will be posted. So it's not just what sounds good, what is a good job description. It is geared towards this algorithm that will then help with relevancy. It will help to match on those keywords with the job boards where candidates are. So that's one of the first ones. Another thing that we've done is in the sourcing or the matching space. And last year we had the opportunity to build alongside Indeed on something called Talent Scout, and it opens up the Indeed database basically for anyone using our software to go out and grab those candidates that are a good fit instead of passively waiting for them to come to you, right? And so this is, again, one of those things that you can unlock that will then open up this opportunity for pattern recognition in a much larger database. And then it pulls them in. You have the chance then to look at it. Also, as part of Talent Scout, you can take a look at it and see, how is my job performing? Why isn't it performing? Heidi's on here telling us 300% increase in candidate flow. I'm not seeing that. Why aren't you seeing that? There are some things that can be done in the job description in those places. And then we also have candidate matching, again, trying to then take what comes into the system. How do you match them to the criteria that Isela and I talked about, going deep on that and getting that right? How do you match them with a high percentage of I don't know, confidence? And then at that point, you've written your job ad, it's performing. And then now you can take those top performers or someone that, you should look at first and start to whittle down on some of those things that will then put you back in the seat of people, right? Rather than admin and technology people.
Yeah. So David, I don't know if there's anything that you can add. She mentioned a whole bunch of things, right? So sourcing and job description and those types of things, as well as, some of the capabilities out there. But I'd like to throw it out to you, and I'm going to add to this now. So, right. Um, how is it helping? But then I'd like to get your perspective also, maybe where we're adding noise or there is some inefficiency or things to be careful about when it comes to AI.
Yeah, absolutely. I always tell people across human capital management, I think TA got the coolest toys the quickest when it comes to AI. Um,
Yeah.
but it's interesting when I talk to CHROs, they actually feel that actually 37% of them said that AI has significantly improved screening efficiency, but everyone expected it to be much higher than that.
Yep.
So, that alone tells me the tools aren't exactly enough. And I certainly agree. I think AI has a real role to play here in talent acquisition. But we really have to be clear about what the problem we're asking AI to solve. It can solve, help with capacity, help recruiters move faster, support the sourcing, summarizing resumes, drafting candidate communications, help generate interview questions, identify some of those patterns that Isela was talking about. But at the same time, it also can help identify areas that aren't very strong within an organization, a program. AI acts as an accelerator. It's going to accelerate a good process, but it's also going to accelerate a flawed process. And I think that is why many CEOs and CHROs are saying that it's only 37%. AI is only helping, 37% of them because the rest of them are really just accelerating a bad process. So I think that to me, that's where some of the noise comes in instead of the signal.
Yeah, definitely. Now, I've heard of this, right? And I think somebody other than or forgive me, I think maybe it was you, Heidi, that had mentioned this earlier. But we've heard of false candidates coming in, but we certainly know that candidates are using AI to write their resumes, their interview prepping that they're doing, even getting real time support when they're going through interviews. So how should employers prepare and or respond to candidates that they might be seeing this AI in action as part of the process?
I'll take this one because
Go ahead.
this is literally um, just happened internally with iSolve, right? Like, again, candidate phishing is real. AI is real. This is for everybody on this call. If some tidbits, what I would recommend with we are at iSolve, we establish what we are referring to are AI guidelines. We put this on our careers website. If you guys have this externally as a best practice, but your HR team should know this, HR operations should know this, your in-house talent team, but basically our guiding principles for AI and hiring. Number one, we still want you to be your authentic self. Every candidate brings a unique mix of experiences and its skills and perspectives. Our interviews are designed to help understand how you think, how you collaborate, and problem solve in real time settings based on lived experiences and how those align with and add to our company values. So, hey, we're being upfront, we're being transparent. We get it. You're going to use AI, we're going to use AI. But at the end of the day, number one, we still want you to be your authentic self. And I want real scenarios tied to your experience, not a generic or vague reply. That's number one. Number two, we believe in a two-way accountability. And what I mean by that is that we encourage and expect candidates to also leverage AI responsibly, obviously, during the interview process. However, it is important that your work product reflects your unique perspective, even when using AI generated content. We expect candidates to follow the policies detailed that we outline for them, and we give them a hiring guide. Like, we want candidates to come to the interview prepared, knowing all of our expectations. The more prepared they are, the better. Because genuinely, this is an interview. Put your best foot forward, and we're doing the same. So we expect candidates to follow what those policies that we outlined while interviewing them. And then in turn, we've outlined how we use and plan to use our own AI and our own hiring process. So there's no ambiguity. It's very transparent in terms of what our expectations are. So again, number one, we want people to be their authentic self. Number two, we believe it's a two-way accountability. And then number three, excuse me, oh my God, preparation. How can I to prepare? I don't know why I couldn't pronounce that word.
Yeah, yeah, go.
Thank you. But we encourage our candidates to prepare. We know that how you perform in an interview can be enhanced, right? How you prepare. So we actually encourage to use resources available to candidates, whether that's doing online research, maybe that's tapping into networks, maybe that's asking the recruiter for clarifying questions around using AI. However, we ask that we do not use AI to supplement their performance in a live interview unless otherwise instructed or agreed upon. So for us, right, having those three guided principles at iSolved has helped leverage set standards and set expectations. And then we also disclose, hey, this is how candidates can use AI. And we walk them through in terms of whether that may be for resources, contact references, key qualifications. But we have realized that, hey, AI is here. We're going to use it. This is what you can expect from us. This is what we can expect from you. And that has something that has worked really well, where there's no ambiguity in the process at all. Now, I would say on the flip, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I love how
Yeah,
progressive that ourselves being with it and how forthcoming we are being with it, because I think one of the worst things we can do is say, don't use AI in the interview
yeah,
process, or
yeah,
don't use AI in preparing your resume, because the systems are rewarding for it right now.
right,
And so,
right.
what, the other thing that I really feel like companies need to be doing is, if your entire hiring process can be gamified by AI, then we're not doing it right, right?
That's
So
yeah,
how
it's a
can
good
you
point.
tuck in those pieces like you were talking about, the human elements? How can you tuck in those human elements and reward for people being forthcoming and saying, I don't know the answer to that, or something like that? Like, how can you add these human elements to it? So that's where you can start to look at it from a hiring process. If AI is plugged in here, 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 does it then kick out? Is it gamified by this process? If so, what else can we do?
Yeah. We also added a comprehensive outline of how we use AI in our hiring process. So, for example, content creation for job descriptions, for interview questions, for sourcing messages, or for all of the above, application screening, resume parsing, and then also interview transcription and summarization. Again, but our number one philosophy is human first, AI powered. We're intentional with how we embed AI into our hiring processes. So when I think about other individuals or organizations doing the same thing, I would encourage that to mention, hey, we are being intentional with how we embed AI into our hiring processes, elevating an effectiveness while keeping humans at the center of key decisions. I personally love the interview transcription and summarization because historically I would
So
be,
helpful.
oh my God, writing like fiercely all my notes and then
Hmm.
looking at my gibberish and not understanding. And that would take away actually being present on my call, where then I can go back and look at my notes. And vice versa. The candidate has the same capability to do so as well. So, having the AI to transcribe and summarize interviews lessens the reliance on my chicken scratch note taking, and actually helps mitigates, I would say, hiring delays and potential. Oh, what do they say? Did I not? What, I can't remember it, having those notes, but that's just one example where it can work into your favor.
Well, you took me right into my next question. You took me,
Mhm.
so, when we talk about the candidate experience and we're talking about AI and the things that it can do to help sharpen the process and accelerate the process and all the good things that happen, there's still that human experience, right?
Yeah,
And how do organizations preserve that human connection while they're still using the AI? And certainly just gave a prime example of one where, it can do the note taking for you so that you can focus and listen in and be present, right? But is there anything else during that process, or key points that keep that human connection in that candidate experience present?
I think the one area for me, if I could jump in,
yeah,
obviously the technology is going to make us a lot more efficient, so we really have to make the human moments matter. And to me, talent acquisition and a recruiter, one of the biggest things is building trust with the candidate.
yeah.
And that's something only a human can do, so far,
I
at
love
least.
that.
I think that's a real big moment that we can add that in as humans and really have that relationship with the candidate.
Yeah, to piggyback on what David said here, and Estella brought it up a little bit earlier, is that when we're transparent, it breeds trust in the candidate process. And so I love how we're tucking those things into a job description and be able to say, this is what the hiring process will look like. Here's where we're using AI during our hiring process. We welcome you to do it in these ways, right? That transparency breeds trust and probably some excitement, where so many people are hiding behind the AI, keyboard and trying to push it off as themselves. And the other thing, I think, when we talk about candidate experience, people want to hear from you. they just do. They need to know where they are. And sometimes it's in a desperate position. I'm about to lose my house. I need to get a job. And sometimes it's just all these open tabs. When you have open tabs on your computer, it doesn't function as properly. But if you're opening these tabs and they sit in the back of your mind. And so that communication, even if it's, hey, we're still working on things, is so valuable to our candidates, which then we know translates into employer brand and employer loyalty and onboarding, and longevity with a company. So there's all these pieces that come into play. And so there are tools within our ATS, and I'm sure other systems, that help keep you close to them, right? An automated email can be helpful. Personalize it so that they know. AI can be really helpful in those types of things. But this communication back and forth is what people are craving in the candidate experience. And I think even if it's clunky, the communication, these experiences that you talked about, David, having a human interaction, it makes it valuable to them. They feel valued and it feels important in the process.
I would ask everybody on this call to think about the last time you applied for a job and not heard anything back. Not a rejection, not an acknowledgement, not a timeline, just silence. Okay. And then think about the last time you genuinely had a good candidate experience where someone communicated clearly, respected your time, and made you feel like a person instead of, I don't know, application number 847. And I'm willing to bet you still remember that company's name, right? And that just goes a long way. I saw we have a best practice where if I have a candidate and they are interviewing, and I mean, they've gone through first round, second round, sure, you can disposition them just to know. But again, offering that white glove experience, a quick phone call. Hey, I tried to reach you. I got your voicemail. Unfortunately, the disposition email, but having that human touch, especially after someone has been 3 interviews is a lot of interviews. And I'm sure they're not just 30 minutes. I'm sure they're 45 minutes, 60 minutes here and there. So again, have those human moments matter. Those are the ones you can automate. The recruiter call where a great candidate is on the fence, maybe the hiring manager conversation that closes a deal, gives them reassurance. But think about that where you've been ghosted versus a time where a simple email, a text, a phone call, voicemail, and how that makes you think of that company, right? And even if it's not the right time now or in the future, or network, or even the recruiter, like, man, that was a great recruiter that I spoke to.
For sure. And the only thing, and it's interesting, I didn't hear anyone talk about it, but I know that you probably have ran into this, is the whole purpose of AI, and at least from an HR perspective, is to free the HR person or your talent acquisition professionals to be able to be more strategic, right? So instead of them having to schedule the interviews and they're going out and doing all these things, to the tactical work that AI can kind of step in and help, they could be doing the strategic stuff, getting not just themselves prepared, but also those hiring managers. I know when I was a manager, we were going through and hiring, I was like sometimes walking in where I scanned their resume for, a few seconds before I'm going in the interview, just because that was the type of day that I was having, right? So I think that's important to think internally just as much as the candidate's perspective. All right. So I think we probably have about time for maybe one more question before we end today. And we always get into talking a little bit about the ethical practices when it's regarding AI. What are those governance things that are in the background that we need to make sure that are in place when you are sourcing, when you're screening, when you're doing candidate matching, which is what our presentation today, interview support. What are the things that are essential when it comes to AI that a company needs to keep in mind?
I will jump in first on this one. I think one of the things that's come to mind, and there's been some recent litigation that we've been following very closely, and a lot of it has to do with bias, right? And that we know our AI can be biased, and mine tends to tell me I'm wonderful all the time. Anytime I'm never challenged by it. I'm always this is the best idea ever, and so you can imagine how that would be applied in hiring, right? This bias becomes more prevalent, and so we're following that really closely. So I think people need to be really careful about that. And one of the surefire ways is if a candidate says, I want to know why I was rejected. If you can't tell them why they were rejected, and be able to provide something in that way, whether you tell them or not, right? If you have the ability to do so and you have a reason why, then you're probably fine. If you have no idea why, if the algorithm decided it for you, that's where a challenge comes in. The human needs to make this decision for us as well.
Right.
And so I think those are some of the things that I think we just really need to be mindful of as we go through and utilizing it. Let's use it more, let's use it right, but let's watch out for our own biases. And then also the outcome. Isela talked about hiring and having people get hired, but then they weren't staying. So is that the outcome we want? What we actually want are employees that stick around, who grow with the company, who help share their talents and skills with us. And so I think a lot of times, especially if we're hiring so quickly and we're growing or we're constantly replacing, we don't take a minute to look at the outcomes and say, did this actually do what it was supposed to do? And if it didn't, let's go back to the drawing board and let's take a look from job description all the way down. What does our process look like? And how is AI involved with this process? But I think that a lot of times we skip that outcome phase.
I agree. I think when we think about governance, again, I'm a little bit biased, right? I was on the talent acquisition side. This is the fun stuff. I'm getting people to our organization. I'm selling the role. I'm talking to people. Like, this is the fun, exciting. And now I transition into the HR operations. I look at it as more the back end. When you think of governance and compliance, it's like, womp, womp. Oh, this is boring. Like, no, this is the stuff that's not so exciting.
Yeah, so
right?
important, right?
Right. So important. So important. So one of the things that I saw that we did, and actually I participate, I'm part of it. What we have, it's an AI steering committee at the executive level, specifically to prevent governance and things like that. And HR has a seat at that table, not just to flag risk, but to make sure that the tools that we're running through talent acquisition are consistent with how, number one, we want to treat people across the entire employment life cycle, especially since, again, we're in HR. I'm in HR for an HCM company. We have payroll, we have benefits, we have social securities, things like that. So there are specific governance floors that I set for our internal talent team, that you need to know what your AI is doing at each stage, be able to explain a decision to a candidate if asked or not, right? It's okay to say, I can't give that feedback right now, but we decided to, like, that's an answer. That's totally okay. But we also draw a hard line on where AI advises versus decides. And I think everybody needs to understand what does that look like. And so for us, again, we have this AI steering committee. We have some do's and don'ts. We have some best practices, especially on hiring, our screening. But we do need a human accountable for that call hiring decision. When AI governance actually fails, I mean, a dramatic breach is something huge. Again, and I would get really specific in certain states, even like Colorado or Illinois, New York City. I know that they have some legislations against that. So I would, if it's not an AI steering committee that you have, I would also, recommend just kind of a best practices, do's and don'ts when you think about from a governance perspective.
Yeah, and more states keep passing that, right? The
Right.
AI and hiring legislation.
Right.
Those are great points. I just wanted to add, just one more thing from my perspective is, good governance isn't what slows hiring down. Good governance is what makes AI-enabled hiring trustworthy and scalable. So the points that you made, like good governance will help you do that.
Fantastic. Well, I want to thank you, all three of you, as experts in joining us today for this webinar and sharing your expertise. Certainly, I found it valuable. I picked up a few tips, and I've been in the industry for quite some time. But I do want to just give a couple more reminders for y'all. Again, we will be recording this, or have recorded this, so there will be a copy of this available for you to listen back to if you want. And then please remember that you are going to get some communication from us related to a survey. We would love to get your feedback. Will not take you a long time to give that, but the more feedback allows us to understand, your what your experience was. And you'll also get the information for the credits for today if you are in need of those for the SHRM CP or HOCI credit. So on behalf of everybody, I'd like to thank you for joining us and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.